4:19, Hosea 4:19. The wind hath bound her up in her wings, and they shall be ashamed because of their sacrifices. Okay, so Israel, he's likening here to something that's getting blown away in the wind. Now, we know what gets blown away in the wind as far as what Israel was used to. That's how they would get their wheat, is they would throw it up in the air. They would beat it and throw it up in the air, and the chaff, the part that was no good, which had hardly any weight, would fly away. The wind would carry it. If it had weight, the grain would fall back down to the ground. So he's saying right here, Israel is like this. They're being blown away in the wind, as most Christians are nowadays. They're carried away with every wind of doctrine. If anybody's got anything new to say or something that tickles their fancy, they jump on board and that's all they can see. I'm not saying you shouldn't have interest in other things. You should. I listen to stuff I know that I'm not going to agree with, so I'll know how to argue against it. Or maybe I'll learn something, and sometimes I do. However, that weird stuff, just let it be a passing fancy. Don't let it become a focus. And there's a lot of strange stuff you'll find in the Bible. But even that strange stuff should not be your mainstay. That's that deep doctrine sometimes won't profit you if you become obsessed with it. He says right here, Israel's become like the chaff. They're being blown away in the wind. Assyria is going to take them off, and then Babylon comes in and finishes the process. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel 2, verse 35. Same analogy. This is talking about the image that the stone smashes. Daniel 2:35. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. That'll be a great day. It hadn't happened yet. We're looking for that day. That'll be millennium. Psalms chapter 1. Psalms 1 verse 4. I'm just showing you this. Israel understood. When Hosea comes in and says you're being carried away with the wind, the Israelites that he's speaking to understand that analogy. Psalm 1 verse 4. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. David used it way back when. All of Israel understands this chaff thing. That's a reference to being worthless. You don't want chaff. You don't want chaff mixed into your bread if you're eating. Now, I don't know if you've ever made bread from scratch. I definitely have not, but Mom used to. And that's grain that she's ground up. And you can tell when the chaff gets in there. You can taste it. It's a little kernel that you want to get out. Hosea, look at it again. Hosea 13. We'll go to verse 3. Hosea 13:3. Therefore they shall be as the morning cloud, and as the early dew that passeth away, as the chaff, there it is again, that is driven with the whirlwind out of the floor. That is, they're up there on the grain floor, and they're throwing this chaff in the air, the wheat in the air, and the chaff flies away. And as the smoke out of the chimney. He says there'll be a distant memory, and the ungodly are that. Now, I know in the time, and when they're making their heyday, and they're causing an uproar, the last thing you think is that there'll be a fleeting memory. But there will be. Nobody today is much concerned about the Assyrians. You hardly ever think about it. The Babylonians is not a main concern to anybody. That's the wicked that flee away. Jeremiah chapter 4. Jeremiah 4:11. Jeremiah 4:11. At that time shall it be said to this people and to Jerusalem, a dry wind of the high places in the wilderness toward the daughter of my people, not to fan nor to cleanse. Even a full wind from those places shall come unto me. Now also will I give sentence against them. He's saying, I'm stirring up my fan. That's the other thing they would do, is they would beat this this grain and throw it up in the air, and if there was no wind, they would carry their own fan to create wind, and that would blow away the chaff. Zechariah chapter 5. Zechariah 5 verse 9. This is the only female angels in the Bible. Zechariah 5:9. Then lifted I up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came out two women, and the wind was in their wings. These women have wings. Now, we say that angels don't have wings. That's true. Angels don't. Cherubim and seraphim do. So there's different classifications of things in heaven. Here's some, I think there's an imitation for everything that's right. There's an imitation that the devil's cooked up. So the devil's cooked him up some angelic things that have wings in order to mimic what's in heaven. He knew because he was a cherub. For they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heaven. Then said I to the angel that talked with me, Whither do these bear the ephah? And he said unto me, To build an house in the land of Shinar, that's Babylon. And it shall be to establish and to set up there, set there upon her own base. That's Israel. That's where they're going. And the journey is not over. The tribulation, that'll finish them off. That'll be the final captivity and the final destruction. And then it'll be set up the way it ought to be. Our verse said that they'll be ashamed of their sacrifices. Said the wind's going to carry them away, and as it carries them away, they'll reflect back and they'll think, all of those sacrifices was for nothing. We're destroyed at this point. I wonder how many people, I know all of them, in hell, the memory does not leave. He leaves the memory intact so they can know and regret. That's the worst thing. One of the great blessings of heaven is that he's going to wipe the memory of bad things away. There will be no more tears, no crying, no memory of the former things. That'll be good, but in hell it won't be. He says they'll be ashamed of their sacrifices. Isaiah 1 verse 29. For they shall be ashamed of the oaks which ye have desired, and ye shall be confounded for the gardens that ye have chosen. That is those high places, the groves. Look around at, let's see, India's a big one on it. Mexico's got a lot of them. These people that worship little gods. And they do this. They fix them. They pamper those little rooms and the way they've ornated everything and bedazzled it. They put a lot of time and effort into it. I wonder if Christians do as much for our God that's the real one. He says they're going to be confused. At some point they're going to say, wait a minute, I put all my hope and trust in that thing, and now when I really need help, it's of no avail. Isaiah 42 verse 17. They shall be turned back. They shall be greatly ashamed that trust in graven images, that say to the molten images, ye are our gods. We don't think about this because images and idols means nothing to us. But we're just one small little blip on the globe. The rest of the world, this still means something. Little images and idols. And when the Antichrist gets here, it's going to come back as a universal form of worship. He's going to set up an image and an idol. And everybody's going to bow down and worship it. Jeremiah chapter 2. Jeremiah 2 verse 26. Jeremiah 2:26. As the thief is ashamed when he is found. That's a bad feeling. I saw a video, I think I saw it on Facebook or something, where some guy was stealing. He was coming down the aisle of like a gas station or something, and he picked something. He was real nonchalant. He picked something up and he stuck it in his pocket, and he looked up to walk down the aisle and he realized he was on camera. And then he tried to do a dance and put it back. Well, it's too late at that point. That's what he's saying right here. Israel's going to be ashamed, just like a thief is ashamed when he's caught. So is the house of Israel ashamed. They, their kings, their princes, their priests, and their prophets. Notice how much religion is involved in all that. The priests, the prophets. Okay. I wonder how much religious effort has been put into things that in eternity we're going to look back and say, what a waste. Absolute waste. You know, don't put all of your effort into doing something to be seen. It should be done to be seen of God, and if somebody else sees that, fine. That's okay. But just as a show to the world is used to shows. You know, the world is full of entertainment, and no religious show that you're going to put on is going to compete with Hollywood. Religion's no good as a form of religion. Right. However, a relationship that is not ashamed, now that one's worth something. Look at Jeremiah 17. Jeremiah 17:13. Jeremiah 17:13. O Lord, the hope of Israel, all that forsake thee shall be ashamed, and they that depart from me shall be written in the earth, because they have forsaken the Lord, the fountain of living waters. There's something that's missing in America, probably the globe, but I can't say the globe, I know America. Or what I know of America, this is missing: shame. There's no embarrassment for anything. There's no, you see them, they get the stupid little tattoos, no regrets. Well, just live a little while, you'll regret that tattoo. There should be some shame over some things. There should be some regret. God says, one day there will be. I'll bring it back. And he'll give them, at the point that reason kicks in, at the judgment seat, everybody then will have a clear mind. He'll be sure they do. And at that point, they'll be ashamed, and they'll regret the actions they took, but at that point it's too late. Now's the time to wake up. Micah chapter 2, verse 5. Micah 2:5. Therefore thou shalt have none that shall cast a cord by lot in the congregation of the Lord. It talks about that congregation of the Lord. You see it in Psalm chapter 1, standing in the congregation. It's referred to as, we say church is a body, it's a called out assembly, and that's the way that God refers to his people always. It's a congregation, it's a group of people. That shows you that Christians should have the desire, whether they do it or not, they should have the desire to get together with other Christians. The desire should not be for a new creature to want to hang out with a bunch of old creatures. New creatures should collect together. Things that are alike group together naturally. Israel had hoped in the abundance of the sacrifices, the drink offerings, and all of the rigmarole that they invented in order to almost con God into giving them prosperity and peace and all the things they wanted. Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs 3 verse 9. I don't harp on these things, so you've probably not heard this verse from me yet, but here it is. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the first fruit of thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. That's the promise God gave to Israel. So they think, okay, God wants to bless us and make us just have an abundance of all the wealth and the riches and all this great stuff. We want the world and that. You can't have both. He says you honor the Lord with your substance. They were honoring him with their lips, but their heart was far from him. And the two won't get you what he's wanting to give them there. They had an attitude of we'll use whoever we can to get whatever we want. And that's what they were looking for. Isaiah 1 verse 10. Hear the word of the Lord, ye rulers of Sodom. Sodom's been gone. He destroyed that long ago. But he wanted to make an impact. This is a statement used for shock value. He's calling Israel Sodom. Give ear unto the law of our God, ye people of Gomorrah. To what purpose is the multitude of your sacrifices unto me, saith the Lord? Well, he knows what the purpose is. They think they're using him. If I give my 10%, if I give my first fruit, he's got to fill up my barn. And I'm hiking the prices on I am full of the burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed beasts, and I delight not in the blood of bullocks, nor lambs, nor of he-goats. God says it doesn't do you any good. Doing it as a ritual doesn't please God. Doing it to please God pleases God. Mark chapter 7. Mark 7 verse 9. Here's what they were doing, and Jesus confronts them, and they get their hand caught in the cookie jar. Mark 7 verse 9. And he said unto them, Full well ye reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your own traditions. Yeah, man loves traditions. For Moses said, Honor thy father and thy mother. And whoso curseth father or mother, let him die the death. That sounds pretty harsh. I think there would be a whole bunch of killing going on if we brought that rule back. Verse 11. But ye say, If a man shall say to his father or his mother, It is Corban, that is to say, a gift, by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, he shall be free. Doesn't that sound positive? All positive. You don't have to give a gift. I'll give you one, and it'll set you free. I don't know about that. Verse 12. And you suffer him no more to do aught for his father or his mother, making the word of God of none effect through your tradition, which ye have delivered, and many such like things do ye. He said, you cooked up some way to sound appealing to the masses. God's word is never appealing to the masses. It's not intended to be. It's intended to be convicting to the individuals. And rarely do you find pure word of God being given where there's a big crowd of people who want it. I mean, used to you would. Used to. There was a lot of spirit power in America, but there's not much anymore. And where you find the big crowds, you find this smooth conversation and appealing to vanity. But the Word of God is not intended that way. I think we already covered that. Hosea 5. Okay, we finished the whole chapter. Hosea 5. Hosea 5, verse 1. Hear ye this, O priest, and hearken, ye house of Israel, and give ye ear, O house of the king. For judgment is toward you, because ye have been a snare on Mizpah, and a net spread upon Tabor. Okay, the priests, the house of the king. This is all the ruling class. The priests were part of the ruling class. They were the governing officials. They governed Israel. If you did something wrong, you would come to the priest to find out what your punishment was. Now, I know that's not the right way to say it. What God expected you to do in reparations for it. Malachi 1 verse 6. It says, a son honoreth his father. Some of them do. Not so much anymore. And a servant his master. If then I be a father, this is God talking, where is mine honor? So God claims that he is a father. He's a father. And you're either in his family or you're not. The devil is a father as well. He says, where did I stop? If I be a master, where is my fear, saith the Lord of hosts unto you? O priests that despise my name, and ye say, wherein have we despised thy name? Ye offer polluted bread upon mine altar, and ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say, the table of the Lord is contemptible. Whew. He's letting them have it. And he makes a blanket statement. He's not saying these people are honoring their father. He's saying it's taken for granted a child should honor his father, and a servant should obey his master. Those are things that not always happen, but should happen. Matter of fact, it's going to get worse and worse. Look at the end of the book, Malachi 4. Malachi 4, verse 5. Things get so bad that in the tribulation, here's one of the reasons God does something supernatural. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, and he shall turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers, lest I come and smite the earth with a curse. It says there's going to come a time where there's no more natural affection. Family ties mean zero. And God says, I'm going to send my witnesses down there, and they're going to start turning the hearts back. Now, the only hearts that'll be turned back are the ones that listen. By and large, they ain't going to be listening. They're going to get so mad at those two witnesses, they chop their head off. But they're down there with a mission. Look at Matthew chapter 11. Matthew 11. Matthew 11, verse 14. Jesus, walking there, says this of John the Baptist. And if you will receive it, this is Elias, which was for to come. They did not receive it. Neither will the mass, the multitude of people, receive it when they show up in the tribulation. There will be a handful who do, just like in Jesus' day. It's going to repeat. Look at Amos chapter 7. Amos 7, verse 9. And the high places of Isaac shall be desolate, and the sanctuaries of Israel shall be laid waste, and I will raise against the house of Jeroboam with the sword. Whew. When God gets in a bad mood, it's not a good day for anybody. And he's telling Israel, if you don't straighten up, here's what's coming. And of course, it did not come to everybody, but it came to those who did not, who refused to listen to him. And if you would listen to him, in every age, God has mercy still available. Even if it's in the tribulation, there's still mercy available if you will submit to it. It requires man to put down pride. He says, in our passage, he talked about in Hosea, a snare on Mitzvah and upon Tabor. Okay, the priest is setting up a religious political system there. And he says they're spreading their nets on Tabor. What do you do with a net? A net is something you catch fish in, or a snare that you catch a bird in. And he's likening the king, the priest, the ruling crowd as being tricky. They're trying to capture somebody. And that's what they're doing. Jeremiah chapter 5. Jeremiah 5, verse 26. For among my people are found wicked men. Imagine that. They lay wait as he that setteth snares. They set a trap. They catch men. It's a dangerous world we live in. Always has been. By and large, nobody cares about you except for your family, maybe. I mean, let's just get real. That's what's special about being a Christian. You should be put in a big family. Amen. Verse 27. As a cage is full of birds, so are their houses full of deceit. Therefore they are become great and waxen rich. The crowd is dangerous. Stay away from the crowd. Verse 28. They are waxen fat. They shine. Yea, they overpass the deeds of the wicked. He started out by saying these were people amongst his people. Wicked men. So, the fact is, amongst Christians, you can find people that are more wicked than the lost world. Just claiming to be a Christian does not set you free from the temptation of wickedness. He says, they judge not the cause of the fatherless, yea, they prosper. The right of the needy they do not judge. That's something we should be doing. We should be judging the cause and the right of the needy and the poor. You'll find needy and poor. It does not matter what dispensation, what age, or what country you live in. There's always needy and there's always poor. Now, it's your job to decipher the real from the con. He says you have to judge that. So you should be able to use wise judgment. And sometimes they'll start out as poor and needy, genuinely, And then once they get used to a handout, they turn into the con. So continue to use judgment. But that's something a Christian should be doing, finding poor people and helping them. I mean, God helped you. Weren't you a poor person? Sure, Amen. Still are. Verse 29. Shall I not visit for these things? Uh-oh. He says, I'm checking up on you. I'm looking to see if you're doing these things, saith the Lord. Shall not my soul be avenged on such a nation as this? It will. Mitzvah is in Gilead, it's east of Jordan. Tabor is a mountain on the west of Jordan. Look, we'll find it, mitzvah in Genesis 31. Mitzvah in Genesis 31, verse 49. I don't know a lot about mitzvah. I'm just going to show you what it says here. Our verse just told us that God judges for certain things and he visits for certain things. And he likened it to mitzvah and Tabor. In Genesis 31:49, and mitzvah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee. Okay, so this name, mitzvah, means God's watching. This was when Laban came down. And he says, don't you do this thing? And Jacob says, don't you do this? Is that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? Yes, Jacob. He says, don't you do this? And they're arguing back and forth, and they're trying to keep from getting their toe over the line because God's warned them. And he says, I tell you what, let's call this mountain mitzvah, and we'll put God in charge of who keeps what covenant. And that's a good thing to do. So mitzvah, God's watching. Tabor, that's Deborah. Deborah assembled her forces on Tabor, and that's where they go after Sisera. And it's Jael that uses a nail right there. So that's mitzvah and Tabor. God's watching, and he'll even use the heathen to execute his will. You know, Jael was not an Israelite, and she polished off the enemy of Israel. God will use anybody he wants to, anytime he wants to. And there's no getting away from it. Hosea 5:2. And then we probably better shut it down. Hosea 5, verse 2. And the revolters are profound to make slaughter, though I have been a rebuker of them all. God said, I've been trying to turn these people, and they're a bunch of rebellious revolters. What that word just sounds disgusting. Revolt. And that's rebellion. Many nations have had revolts. That's civil wars. And that's one crowd saying we're in rebellion against another crowd. That's how we got America. We rebelled against the King of England. Now, I'm not saying the King of England was any good. He was not. He was anti-God. So that was of God that we got a nation. That's good. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that's a revolt. That's how nations get created, is revolts. Jeremiah chapter 5. Jeremiah 5, verse 23. The indication is this. Israel, in the end times, and even in Jesus' day they did this, they were the people of God as a nation, and they decided, we don't like what God's doing, we're revolting against it, we're going to rebel and create our own thing. There's the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, that's creating their own nation, their own set of rules. Jeremiah 5:23. But this people hath a revolting and rebellious heart. They are revolted and gone. Neither say they in their heart, let us now fear the Lord our God, that giveth rain, both the former and the latter in its season. He reserveth unto us the appointed weeks of the harvest. So they don't care about God's rules. They want to rebel and set up their own rules, and they did. Look it up sometime. I should have got you the info on it. I didn't. But if you look up, you can find the Babylonian Talmud online, and there's several translations of it. It is a volume of about 600 books. That's how many rules and regulations they came up with in rebellion to God. So you rebel against God, you don't make things more simple. You make them more complicated. Think about it. Of all the things God could say throughout all of the years of human history, and he packed it into that much right there. I couldn't do that. I mean, I covered 2 verses in 45 hours, you know. So, he's quite something. Man trying to duplicate it can never come close. Hosea 9, verse 5. Hosea 9, verse... did I say 5? It's verse 15. Hosea 9:15. All their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I dislike them. There I hated them. Wow. I don't preach on this a whole lot because you can go to extremes. God does have hate, and there are individuals he hates. See to it you're not one. He says right here, there was a group right there. They were being wicked and coding it as a religious thing, and I hated them. Not what they were doing, them. For the wickedness of their doings, I will drive them out of mine house. I will love them no more. All their princes are revolters. Be careful when the spirit of rebellion raises up in you, whoever the rebellion is against. You can have a righteous indignation against wickedness, but even that righteous indignation needs to be in check because God's ultimately in control. And if the spirit of rebellion will take over even in the spirit of righteous rebellion against wickedness, if the focus becomes your rebellion and you're going to set things straight, it becomes wickedness. We rebel against the devil and choose to submit to God. And that's about as far as we can rebel. But those revolters are in a bad crowd. All right, we'll stop it there. We'll pick up at Hosea 5:3 next week.